That's right.
It's the little things that make our weight room, ours and our, what I mean, like original to us.
That's right. That's right.
We've, you and I have talked plenty of times. We've talked on the phone. We've exchanged emails and texts for a long time. I
Yeah.
am excited to be able to introduce you to everybody that doesn't know who you are, because I'm a big fan of your work. Please, Coach, please introduce yourself to everybody. Give a little bit of your background so they can know where you are, where you've been, a little bit about your journey and yourself.
Well, Coach, I'm honored to be on. Coach John Beerbower. I serve as the Director of Strength and Conditioning at McHenry High School, Northern Illinois. Some would say northwest of Chicago, but it's pretty far northwest. Um, and I've had the privilege of serving in education for about 24 years,
Wow.
and um, most of that has been here at McHenry in some capacity, whether physical education, teaching, coaching, but especially this last half has been mostly through training and strength and conditioning. So I'm also an adjunct professor up at Carthage College in Kenosha. Done that for about a dozen years. Um, Gina and I, she's also a teacher over at Grays Lake. We have 4 children. Riley's up in college. Brett's a senior, and Trace a freshman, and Brady's in 4th grade. So we're a busy family, blessed. But also recently was honored to be asked to serve our state with strength and conditioning through the NHSCA. And that's been a real um, great opportunity to help connect coaches throughout our state. And so I think that's how we met a mutual friend through one of the clinics. And so that he told me about the great work you're doing with podcasts. I've enjoyed some of the episodes, and I'm honored to be included this morning. So
Yeah, shout out
thank
to you,
you.
Trey, for I know you're listening right now, Trey. Shout out to you for the connection here. And he was right, like, because he's like, man, he's like, I've seen him run a weight room, right? And so, like, he and I, what we talked about is, as a strength coach, one real easy way to tell, like, is just how things are run, and like, not just the how athletes are performing their lifts, but the logistical constraints of how athletes move from station to station. Do they have a sense of urgency? Like, are they wearing the clothes they're supposed to wear? Like, just those little things that add up and show how prepared a coach is, what his program or his or her program is. Like, doesn't matter. But that was just something that he showered you with compliments, and from our conversation, like, you showing me your room and how organized it is when there weren't athletes in there, and the different TVs you had of all the like, you could just tell that you take pride in what you do. And that's really one of the biggest things that I wanted to highlight for more coaches to do, because I've been in weight rooms where that's not the case.
Yeah, that's really kind of you, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with just how I grew up, how I was raised. I'm kind of a kid that grew up in a rural area, um, farming communities, and some of those places don't have a lot, but they take pride in what they have. And especially I was grateful. My first job was in a real small school, but there was pride there, and I think the same thing. You want to come into a space, no matter if you have a lot of equipment or um, a big budget or small budget, whatever you're going to do, have it. There's evidence where there's pride, and just like at your home, you can tell if somebody's taking pride in what they have. And so when people come in, or students want to come in, we want them to be inspired to be in that facility and know that it's something special to get to train here. And I think there's ways you can do that, but I also believe it's very important. So you mentioned those TVs. That was something a couple years ago. We always would try to put up a lot of pictures of people uh, who had gotten awards and things, and record boards. But used to be you'd print those out and get a ladder and stick those up. And now with technology, the TVs, we got our first few monitors. The minute I saw what that would give me the ability to do, we've really loved those and have added a few more. So there's several. We'll have one with just some inspirational quotes and messages that we just want to keep in front of kids throughout the day, and I can change those at any moment too, which is nice. Um, just recently, we had the 9/11 war, so always put up some reminders of that day or just whatever is going on. But there's one that we honor our kids, that we give a belt out as an award, usually once a week, but just highlighting one kid who really kind of as our champion of the week based on their effort and their attitude or their gains or just being a great example for others. So all those historical winners are up there. We put our current varsity teams up on one. We put any current records or leaderboards we've ran. But the one that I wanted to mention that I'm just as proud of, if not most proud of, and gets a lot of attention is the one that's all of our kids who are serving or have served in the military. And, you know, the other athletes get a lot of attention, which is great. But those heroes, you know, we're just as proud of them. And I think that's the one that gets the most attention with adults and people come back. They'll literally stand there, wait for the one to scroll by of the picture of maybe a brother that's in the Air Force, or want to see if they're still up there. And so those little things, like you mentioned them, I wanted to say, like, those can really don't take those for granted as a coach of the things you have up in your room and how they provide an environment that inspires the kids, but then also makes them have pride too. It's like, I'm proud of that space because I'm represented in it. So, yeah.
Something I wrote down there is the fact that your population, you know, in the high school world, you're dealing with almost 90% of athletes that may never play sport again, right? And it stops at almost a really young age, because when you work in college, at least they went from high school to college. Talk to that for the high school strength coaches that are in that world to help them, but then also talk some reality, some sense into any coach that is in college considering or in the interview process of going to high school, to understand the implications of that and then how to best serve, you know, realistically 14 to 18-year-olds.
Well, that's a great question, and kind of redirect me if I get off track on what you're hoping to get. But for us, it's expanded every year. So we train about 1,100 students every day between both campuses. Okay, and so when the freshmen come in, they take an intro to strength class. Now it's evolved, right? I mean,
like 1,100 kids, that's insane. Here at Strength Coach Network, we pride ourselves on giving you the best quality information from strength and conditioning coaches and practitioners that still work with or have worked with athletes. This is not theory. We are always about giving you practical information that you can apply day one, the minute you're done listening to this. And you can check us out for a $1 trial in the link down below. Click that link and find out more about us. TeamBuildr has been my trusted source for online software programs for my athletes since 2019. Since then, they've continued to grow. They have this new practice integration where practice planning can integrate with the sport coach. You have your sports science, your AMS, the questionnaires. They've continued to evolve and keep giving you the things that you need. It has made my life easier as a strength coach. I want the same for you. You do not need to keep printing on lift cards. Please, printing on lift cards in Excel, you don't need to do that. If you need help being able to purchase it, they have a pre-written grant on their website. They're also part owners in the Plyomat with Coach Rich Burnett. So if you need to get a good device that can accurately and validly and quickly get your jump height and ground contact time, so now you can get RSI, Plyomat's a great choice. We utilize that at Goldfinch. Check TeamBuildr. Check them out in the link down below. Please stop printing on lift cards. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your athlete's life easier. It's easier to program on the back end. Check out TeamBuildr in the link down below.
Yeah, so we when we do that, you know, the freshmen come in and take an intro to strength class. We have 3 PE teachers there that I'm very proud of. I want to give them a shout out: Coach Hutchinson, Coach Swanson, Coach Centella. And just like a coach has great freshman coaches that they're proud of, these people, you know, they're our students' first exposure to the high school here. And so it's really important that those are ones that are relationship builders, like all the teachers, but we want them to feel connected right away. And we take it real slow. That first quarter, they're just movement qualities, and then slowly acclimating to adding weights. And so there's that progression. But I'm saying that because then they come over sophomore year to the campus I'm at, and then that's their first time being in with all the other juniors and seniors, which can be a little intimidating in a large weight room. And then the senior year, now that they've had 2 years of training, and we implement some more advanced types of things. So those are like our athletes. And then you have a population of students that just want to learn how to they want to take strength and conditioning as their physical education class. So and that's important. And that we've evolved to where we expanded the weight room this past year to really meet the students' needs that are in that class. So that's a broad variety of students. And you mentioned the population who will go on and play at the next level. And And I do think that's an important perspective for people working at the high school level. I I'm one that did not come out into strength and conditioning by going to undergrad for exercise science and those areas. I came out, and I'm very grateful that I came through some excellent physical education uh, preparatory training. And looking back at those classes, we had great teaching methods teachers talking about the importance of planning and organization and space and all these things. And I know those shape how I view strength and conditioning, working with large populations. And I think the more that I saw my role need to serve through strength and conditioning, I was always trying to backfill with more of that knowledge on strength and conditioning. But it's been great to be in this role because I think what you're asking about how this is unique is, and this is no slight on those at the college level, because that's very aspirational. You like to see the equipment, you're inspired by what they're doing, or getting to work with elite level athletes, and you learn from those things. I'm like every other coach. I get great ideas from some of the things that the college strength coaches are doing. But I would also say that with the students I'm working with day in and day out, um, that model is to serve to produce those athletes to have success at the college level. My model for these students is part of their overall experience being at the school day, with health and wellness. And so, as students think about, they're coming in, they're spending hours in a desk on a Chromebook, and so having it be part of their daily routine to come in and have physical education or strength and conditioning, like that's really an important part of your mission as a coach or teacher at the high school level. Develop those daily habits and routines, and especially to create those patterns that will carry on when they're no longer um, with you when they graduate. You start with the end in mind. So what are you doing to prepare them for when they walk across that stage, whether it be through life with a job or career, or going on to college or going on the trades? Well, for us, what are we doing to prepare them for when they finish up with us in our weight room? Are they going to have the skills and the confidence to be able to go to their local gym and continue those habits if they don't go on? Or are they going to go to their college and feel comfortable going into the rec center and continuing those things because of the experiences you've provided them? And then for our athletes, are they coming in ready to go, where they are not, and when they come in with that freshman group, are they giving us evidence back like, Coach, I'm really proud of the experience I had. I come in with knowledge. I was at the top of my group, and I was coming in ready to go. And so I like all those things matter, but every student here is so different, and it's not a one size fits all. That's the one thing I would say for those looking to go to high school is, if you go in and like, I work with this volleyball team, or I work as a football assistant strength coach, like those lanes are so specific and narrow what you need to do. Those outcomes are so specific. You're tailoring to that outcome. Whereas with what we're dealing with here is you're talking about encouraging students every day, physically, mental, emotionally, and socially, to develop an overall plan for their wellness and their health. And strength is a big part of that. The physical is a big part of that, but it's not all of it. And some of them have motivational challenges. Some of them have things going on at home, and all those are part of what you do. So your skill set and your toolbox, and you're also working within a system or ecosystem of a school, an educational institution, and how that plays a role. So I'm kind of hinting on a lot of different things. You can redirect me how you want, but that's a change, and I think coming through education into that role helped me more than maybe had I come from the other side and then trying to figure out how to work within education, if that makes sense.
That does. Let's start there then. How can strength coaches that didn't have your experience then understand how they can, let's treat it like the education system is the steak dish meal, and the strength and conditioning side of it is the mashed potatoes, the asparagus. It's the side. It complements it. And how do we make sure that we're doing it really, really well and not trying to negate from or take away from, or just build that continual support system, especially when you're talking about strength and conditioning, the general population student, athlete who's not a student, or excuse me, student who is not an athlete. And you have to come up with like a curriculum of, okay, you're going to do intro to this and progress them throughout their high school years, just like you said. So that way, when they leave, they're technically competent in how to do a 1.5 rep barbell back squat by the time they're a senior. So that way, when they go into the workforce and they're, they need to actually go and exercise, because we're starting to see corporate wellness being brought in, because corporations understand if their employees are exercising, it helps them be more productive and make less errors. So all of those things.
Yeah, I think if you were going to start at a school, you realize that I always tell people come visit here, or that don't make your chapter 1 somebody else's chapter 20. It's very easy to get overwhelmed with this, like the end result for somebody that's been doing it for a while. But what I would say to do is right away, just try to identify and do as much as you can observing, like what are the things that I could immediately do that would make the biggest impact. We call it low hanging fruit, and just get that momentum. And that momentum of all of a sudden, not only my stakeholders within the district, get to know and build relationships with our head coaches, my AD, our administration, be a great communicator, because if you're not advocating for yourself and the program and the students, you can't expect other people to do that for you. So, we always try to take a lot of pride in communication on a regular basis. Here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing. Here's the success the students are having, and be out front on that. And I think that right away, as you mentioned pride earlier, the pride in the facility, but the pride you're having in what the kids are doing, more so than yourself, but what the kids are doing, their successes, that is something that the district is excited about and they're proud of. And then I also think it's important to be an excellent listener to what specifically, how do your leaders and how does your school talk about what they want to accomplish? Like any organization, I pay attention to when our superintendent's talking about what they're trying to do, the strategic plan of the district. Anytime we have a couple new principals here in the summer, I was able to schedule some time and share a little bit about here's what our program does, but really, what do you want to accomplish here in this first year? And then as you listen, you can hear about what things they want to do, and then you can provide evidence on how you can help support them in what they're trying to do. And again, that's usually some macro goals about the students' success as individuals, their success and their as a student, but also just with their mental health and their physical health, like all those things. So I think what advice I would say is, you're coming into school, right away, try to identify how your program will not only serve the new students the best, but also align with what your district is trying to do. And so then you're part of that culture that the district is proud of, and you can feel that your values are aligning. Because if not, it's very tempting to come in the morning, come in the weight room, open it up, put the workout up, get things going, leave at the end of the day and just kind of be on an island. And you have to be very intentional about paying. I try to get on as many committees as I can, sometimes that don't have as much to do with training, because I want to not only do a better job making sure this weight room and our program is part of what our district culture is, but I also want to make sure that our district has my voice at the table as well. So I think that would be some good advice right away, because coming into from a college setting, which I don't have experience doing, but I would just say that would be advice. Somebody asked me, what would you say? I'm like, right away, try to become very familiar with what your school is about, what they're proud of, what their needs are, and what their vision is. And then, start speaking that language. That common language is important. So, yeah.
Will you talk on school hierarchy then? Because there might be plenty of strength, like we have high school, college, tactical, pro, like tons of all the sectors, and some of them might not be familiar with the hierarchy. And you're saying superintendent, principal, they're like, wait a minute, who's in charge? Where's the athletic director, activities director, all these different words? Vacations are meant for you to be outside doing things that you love and reconnecting with your family and your friends and recharging your battery. It is not meant for you to travel and listen to some coach talk in a conference hall and eat some food that you know really isn't the best thing that you want to be eating. Take back your vacations and do so with a Strength Coach Network annual membership. When you purchase an annual membership, you're going to get access to our course, Performance Coaching 101. In the subsequent years, it'll renew and you'll get access to 102 and 103. Each year, you're going to get access to 2 NSCA CEUs and 10 CSCCA CEUs. These CEUs will allow you to be able to learn from the comfort of your office. You'll be able to earn CEUs on your time rather than having to travel. Take back your vacation and be able to do this with a Strength Coach Network annual membership. Click the link down below for more information. Dasher has completely changed the game for how I'm able to time my athletes, whether I'm doing ACL, max velo, or curvilinear running. Had the blues, had the blacks at Goldfinch. Now that I have the silvers, this has saved me so much time in setup, breakdown if I'm going from Ankeny to Huxley or from Ankeny to the Nevada location or Nevada to Huxley. Like wherever I got to go time athletes, it has made my ability to go from one place to another so much easier with the silvers. Strength coaches that have to go from one field to the other or from the field to the court, this will help you save time. Now, in the spirit of saving time, you also have the ability to have an API interaction with TeamBuilder, so now you can see all the data on the back end. Seeing data on the back end, Dasher has a free app, a player profile app that will allow athletes to see their data. Over 6,000 coaches and athletes have done so. And if you want more than just the timing gates, if you check them out in the link down below, they have solutions to help you out with vertical jump, broad jump, RSI, all that. Check them out in the link down below.
Okay. Well, for we're in Illinois, so we have, our main primary leader of the district is our superintendent of schools, right? And he has a board of community, school board, which are elected officials from the community that they vote, they meet, they talk about how that's at the end of the day, you serve the community if you're in a public high school. The community's tax dollars fund what you're doing to provide that. So those representatives of the community work with that superintendent. They technically hire that superintendent to organize and lead. And then each building usually will have a principal. They're definitely not middle management, but their job is to have ownership and inspiration and be the edge. I mean, that's like a really hard, impossible job, but we have excellent leaders that do that. And so they're the lead for that building. Think of it like the head coach for that building.
Is it almost like a franchise owner of like a Chick-fil-A or
yeah?
Forgive my ignorance on maybe like an over crude and simple, but like, hey, following and like, each school can't be like, oh, we're going to do our own thing. It's no, we're going to fall in line with what the kind of like you said, the athletic director at a college, and then each team sport has to kind of fall in line with what
That's right. That's right. And in a lot of ways, your analogy is great, because if you had one of those restaurants that was not, maybe the profits weren't as good as the other one, you'd be like, why is this one having more success? Why is there a bunch of complaints about this one? Is discipline issues or attendance more of an issue in this building or the other? So it's a great way to look at it. So those principals, that's an important job. So, but they can't do it by themselves. So they have assistants that have different lanes of tasks that they're in charge of, like offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. You have people who are leads with like discipline and student services. And sometimes in smaller schools, maybe that principal is doing all those roles, right? I grew up community of faith. My dad was in the ministry. So in a small church, you wear all the hats. Whereas others, you might be the lead teaching pastor and you have a children's ministry. So, we can make this look in different ways, but that would be the way I explain it. You have those assistant principals, and then we have like divisional chairs that help do evaluations for the teaching team in each subject area, English, science, physical education. So that's kind of the hierarchy there. So there's quite the chain of command and quite a network that you work within. And then on the athletics side, you usually have an athletics director that their job is to manage all the extracurricular activities that are athletic based. And sometimes you'll have an activities director who will kind of look for non-athletic but club-based activities. And so sometimes you'll have those stakeholders work with you on what you're doing as well. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And Yeah, that's absolutely super interesting to me. Like that's why I asked it, and because I just want to, you know, do the best that I can serving the coaches that listen to this show that are interested in trying to do it, because I've said it before about tactical. I didn't want strength coaches leaving college going tactical, being like, oh, they only work 40 hours a week. Let's just mail it in and not do our job. Like, let's go do nothing, right? I feel an immense amount of pride based on how I was raised. My father worked in a grocery store as a bag boy, front end manager, assistant store manager, store manager, like, running a business. And I say that because he took pride in his quote unquote little job. So I never wanted any tactical strength coach to just go there and mail it in, considering the population they're serving are men and women that serve our country. I also don't want the same for high school, because I don't want strength coaches to be like, oh, high school, that sounds sweet. I can just work with a bunch of kids, just write up a workout, slap it on the wall, and not have to go and do it. And I know it might be an overly reductionist view with that, but I'm just trying to make sure that they can't not know that I've been like, hey, this is the hierarchy, this is how you work, and this is how you do things the right way. So because I'm so obsessed with that, I want to know it, but then I also want to know it to help educate our listeners.
Yeah, and that, you know, it really means a lot that you say that, because I do think that coming into that role, I'm sorry, there's an announcement that plays over the top. They always run that
Oh, you're
musical
good.
minute, so
This is this every strength coach is just like, hey, this is the quirks of our room. You know what I
I got a
mean? Like,
speaker
that's
right
great.
above me
You
here.
just go. You
Um,
just got to roll with it.
yeah, well, that was what I was going to say. Is you have to realize right away you have to have tremendous flexibility, and you have to be able to adjust on the fly to so many variables. You have the greatest thing planned, something happens. You go on a lockdown drill. There's a fire drill. You have something happens where a team changes things up on you, which I know all coaches are familiar with. But at any given point, a student just needs your time, your focused attention at that moment, and I just think based on the changes where you have such a wide variety. I was even reflecting about just our training with we always call it like these things are intention, or these balancing truths. The art of coaching, some people will say, is the more the older I get, the more I realize that, like, you have to have a tremendous agility with how you uh, handle things each day, because you can have this structure. And I'm honored you gave us that praise on the structure. And especially in the summer, I feel like that might almost be easier for me to accomplish, because it's just teams, individual with their coaches, so I can be very on top of, like, here's exactly how we're going to run. And then there's other times where you have a group that they need a little bit more autonomy and freedom because of what the nature of what they're needing. And so you have to be willing to at any point adjust and have enough tools in your tool bag. Realize, this group, this is what they're lacking. So this is how we need to design things to accomplish that goal. Whereas others, it might be like, this is another area. And so that tension always is in check, if that makes sense when training. And I think of it like a coach that's like an expert in a certain type of offense. So that's like the only thing they know how to run, and they're always just looking for how they can make that fit with the players. And you have others that say, "Here's what I have. How can I have these students be the most successful? So I'm going to adapt a little bit what I'm doing, offensive, defensively, to play to their strengths." So you have to do that on a much larger scale at the high school level, depending on this hour. I've got a higher percentage of really unmotivated kids, or a lot of discipline issues. Whereas another, I've got some great leaders in this class that are highly motivated, and just the breadth of that diversity just has a big impact on how high school coaches do their job. And I think that's an area that um, people sometimes underestimate. You're working with people, and any given day, um, that's a tremendous blessing, and it's an honor, and it's very rewarding. But there's a trade-off with that too, and becomes it's just every day's different, because no two people are the same, and any given day, what's going on, and especially you look at the end of the day, the number of interactions you had. Some people having a good day, some bad days. Some people had a great day in the weight room, others didn't. And so just that volume of that amount of interactions is a skill set that takes time to get acclimated to. Um,
you teed up my next question that I wrote down about summer training. What does that look like for y'all?
So in the summers, we have a high percentage of students that take summer school here, and it's something our school is proud of. So again, going back to like what's the environment of your school? So our school promotes heavily kids getting classes to get ahead or get a credit done. So our coaches have to work around that with their camps and things, realizing that at any given point they have a percentage of students that are in summer school. So I'll run an early morning session for any students in summer school that's kind of a catch-all, multi-sport, multi-age, and then we'll schedule times with the teams based on, okay, you're running camp at this time, we'll get the lift done before you go to camp. Or, this month in June, we're heavy with, our travel or competitive work. And then July, we're going to be more focused with you in training. So each team and sport's a little different, but we'll try to get everybody in as much as they can, and we can work together. And my role is really to kind of facilitate that schedule, making sure that there's some continuity with how we're up here in the weight room. And it is a challenge in the summer because a lot of times that's the first experience for incoming freshmen coming in. So you want them to be able to jump right in and train with the team, but yet you don't want to go around the needs for safety and kind of working slow like we do with our block zero, our intro class. So they kind of bypass that because they come in for those 8 weeks and want to jump in and train. So you have to find that balance. I find in the summer that's an important time for the team to, everybody's preparing for the next year. So there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of work you do on just team cohesion and develop, seeing which kids are emerging as leaders, giving them a chance to show their strength, not only in the weight room, but with being a great teammate and finding their voice, not only with sharing with the team. So it's just a real fun time to work together, have a lot of optimism for the season, see the gains they're making, feel confidence. We want them leaving the summer feeling really great about the start of the school year. That's the goal, is how they feel about it. They feel stronger. Do I have a lot more self-belief? I feel confident what I'm doing. Have I made some stronger friendships? So all areas we should be stronger at the end of the summer.
The question then somebody in the high school might be thinking is like, all right, what about how you handling nutrition in the summer to make sure that you're pairing the really good lifting with, good foundational nutrition to build upon their gains?
Well, we keep scales up at the front, and we try to encourage those kids to regularly make that a habit as they come in to kind of check where they're at, not only with body weight, but that's something I don't have a tremendous amount of resources to provide a lot of nutrition, but it's something we have taken pride in the last few years of getting some products up here that, are things that they can see, can try, that then they get exposure to where, maybe that inspires them to purchase those things on their own, or we make them available. Some coaches believe in it so much that they'll work with me on, I want to provide a kid a muscle milk or a shake at the end of every session. So if we work together with that individual sport coach and we get those up here, then some teams do that. Others, it's things that I'll try to do. We do a summer training shirt that, I sell, and basically it's a way to make some money to buy nutrition items that I can give out for the kid who didn't eat breakfast that way. Just take one. Or maybe, hey, you had a great session this day, everybody grab a protein bar on the way out. Of course they love that, but so we're trying to do better with that. But it's also through, every day when they come in, we try to assess and remind them, hey, let's keep up our positive habits. Did you eat breakfast today? Did you get enough sleep? Are you hydrating? So we're reminding them those, and I'm asking the students to take stock on those each day. So as they come in, before we do the warm-up lines, huddle leaders, check in everybody on your 5-star habits. How did they do? And then I'm echoing that behavior, but I want them already knowing first thing I'm going to be asked is how was my diet and how was my sleep? So they're already kind of prepared. Like, even if they weren't thinking about it, they know they're going to be asked, like us. If you know when you're going into something, somebody's going to ask you something right out of the gate. It's at least in the back of your mind. So that's a couple ways we try to attack it.
Some of the college strength coaches might be listening like, yeah, well, in the middle of your day, your athletes they're at least eating, right? They're getting lunch provided to them in the middle of the day. So that's at least a win.
Yeah. And we there's a lot of students, right away, you become really good at reading body language and things. And I'll say, hey, how are you doing today? And I'll never hey, did you get breakfast? No, I didn't have anything. Or, this, that, and you pick up on that right away with the students on how their day is going. And or maybe we start early here, so if they miss that, maybe they don't eat again till lunch, and then if they don't get a snack between lunch and practice, you really map out the school day and the fueling habits and the patterns. We do need to keep that on our students' radar screen, not just in the summer, but the school year.
How about multi-sport athletes? Is it good? Like, what have you seen? How do you best serve those athletes and keep them?
Well, we promote it. We promote it here. I'm a believer in that. I do find that some of the sports, especially, have a high travel culture now. It's becoming harder for that to be. I'm seeing this become more challenging for the students to do that. But it's a great thing, and I think it's a great thing because they not only for just the sturdiness of the athlete by doing multiple activities throughout the year, but I think it's good to be exposed to different playing strategies, different coaching styles, different voices. You all of a sudden it's like, well, my basketball coach talks about this, and my football coach mentions the same thing, and then my baseball coach, there is something that's pretty special about going through a year and having these overarching family of McHenry Warriors that we're part of, but then having these groups of these different team dynamics they're part of as well. And so I think that gives kids overall a great experience beyond just the physical benefits. And our students, so for us here, we train every day during physical education because that is in Illinois, physical education, daily PE is a required course, which we're grateful for that in Illinois. Now, some schools will waive out because of they're in season, so they're allowed to waive out. A few years ago, that was something that we worked hard with our district on, was removing those athletic waivers. You can be waived out for a medical reason, obviously, or because you're in season, but we felt strongly about the importance of daily physical education in that student schedule for their health. And again, talking about why that's so important. So now that could be for us that they're taking a strength and conditioning class as that PE class. Others, it might be adventure education. They're learning how to do rock climbing. It's a variety. Some take classes that are pool based. Some are fitness based classes. Some are traditional team sports. So, but for our strength and conditioning students, we encourage our athletes, you should be in strength and conditioning as your PE class because you already have that built in your day. And the way that helps us is because that takes pressure off those coaches and athletes to then build that in at the beginning or end of the day, because you're taking advantage of that time that's already built into your day. Yep. Because of that means that's happening year round. So I always say that's kind of our base training that happens, in season, off season, all season. And, the analogy that our coach of McHenry, it's like building a pizza, not because we're here in Chicago, but it's it's the crust and the sauce every day in class. That's the basics. And we do that really well. So then we can top it, sprinkle it however we want after school. So then on our athletes, if they're going to practice, obviously, their demands at practice, change of direction, acceleration, what they're doing, that's a topping that they're getting filled because they've already got that base. Some teams will go ahead and do an additional session with me after school as a topping, but that base is critical. And I feel like that's a unique advantage year round because that multi-sport athlete, they're always in season. So they're kind of losing that off-season block with their teams. Yeah. But they're still making gains year round because they're getting that base training in PE while they're an athlete. And so I think that's always an element in high school that you have to be aware of, is like, is there a level of year round base that I can maintain? And then is there an ability to then in the off season bring those teams in? Like right now we have baseball, we have basketball teams that are coming in after school that are comprised of groups of kids that are not already in a sport. Some of the baseball players play football, so they're not coming up because they're at practice. But those students then are doing things that we wouldn't necessarily do in the PE class, pushing the sled, doing a lot more plyometrics. We sprint once a week. And the only reason those movements and those modalities are important, but there wouldn't be something I would do maybe at the last period of the day if I knew I was going to go play in a regional championship game a couple hours later. but they are acclimated to training year round. So we still lift on a game day. We still train on a game day at that base crust and sauce level, but then we bring them in after school to build on that if they're in an off-season group. So it's a model for us that's worked well to kind of serve everybody with all those different sports and that variety, where we're kind of providing opportunity for everything. You know, base training year-round, consistent, in the physical education class, after school, bringing in your sport. And then that also helps too, because sometimes the coaches like to say, you know, I wish sometimes our team could just train just us together, where they're not part of a PE class where they're in with other students. Well, you get that after school because you're coming in as a team. So
No, I love that analogy. And I think there's a lot of strength coaches that just heard that, like, wow, like that makes so much sense, because yes, you still want to be able to help the athletes get stronger, because that's what we do as strength coaches. But man, to just be able to serve those student athletes to do their sport and be able to play multiple sports, but still have a foundational level of strength, like you're just doing right by the athlete.
right.
Powerlift has been my choice for strength and conditioning equipment ever since I got into the field. Right now, I still have their racks, I have their barbells, I have their bumpers, specialty bars, and we have the IMTP device at Goldfinch, and it's been great for us because it's allowed us to free up the rack where we used to have to do the IMTPs. Now we use that IMTP device, roll it around, we've created more space. You have to check them out. Doesn't matter if in your college, high school, pro, tactical, or private, they have the ability to make whatever customizations and whatever adjustments you need. I was a part of the weight room that was the 32 brand new rack facility at Iowa football. You see what they did for TCU football. Doesn't matter how big, how small, whatever your customizations are, Powerlift is number one in the exercise equipment space for a reason. Check them out in the link down below. Vitruve has been my choice for VBT for years now, not only because of the encoder and how well it works with the app, and you can film movements with the camera and get live variable feedback in real time if you so choose to on the app, but the fact of the amount of content they have been pushing out to help coaches better understand VBT. It's not only just to move the bar faster. You can be working on what's the appropriate load for high rep sets based off velocity loss. You can be looking at velocity loss threshold between sets, in between reps. VBT is not just moving the bar fast. It's moving the bar fast with heavy weights. It's not just moving lightweight fast. And Vitruve has been at the forefront educating coaches on VBT and how to do it the right way. Check them out in the link down below. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about.
That's right. You know, and helping them be their best. You know, I think of this place kind of like a body shop. You know, you're coming in, you know, I'm not a NASCAR person, but you know, they're out on the track racing. When they come back into the garage or the pit crew, we want to build them up. You know, we want to build them up mind, body, and spirit, right? We want to have them come in and be like, love being up there. I love being encouraged, being around my teammates, being inspired, getting stronger, taking care of my body. If they're in season, they might be banged up. And so letting them having a little bit of freedom to kind of work on some of the stretching and mobility, tissue work, those things, I'm okay with that in season. They know what I expect to continue to still get a few of their main lifts in, but you know, we work with them in that area. And then the off season, that's a different story. But giving them what they need to be their best is our goal. It's about the athlete, not about us.
For you, are you able to do that just because of how long you've been there? You've been in this game for a while, you're seasoned, so you have all of that experience and you have that detached point of view, because you know the length of time that you've been, 24 years working in education and serving athletes, and the amount of time that you've been where you're at. Is that part of the ability for you to have all your systems in place? Like, what has been the key to your success? And maybe not for you, what would the superintendent or the principal at your school, what would they say has been your key to success?
That's a very good question. I think a couple things. I think some of your I've always had good relationships with our superintendents, but that's something like any relationship, you have to put effort into it as well. But I know they, at the end of the day too, they want to see a return on investment in terms of what they're doing, but it's not necessarily in a black and white, dollars and cents return on investment, but return on investment in the quality of the experience for the student. So I think our success has been, in a lot of ways, I like that question because there's a couple things. It would be very easy to just say, well, the success is about like your team's records, and um, and again, that can be some little bit more of that college influence, right? But I think what you find at the high school level is some of your success metrics are not necessarily about that as much. Um, if you're doing things the right way, the roots versus roots produce fruits analogy. Like if you do those things the right way, there are teams that strength and conditioning background is a difference maker, and it's an accelerator for them to be more successful. There's other times where you made tremendous progress in the weight room or these students in those areas, and they weren't successful record wise. And if your whole value as a coach was tied to that, that would be very demoralizing. But if your KPIs are about making a difference in these students' lives, making them or helping to serve them beyond just that area, then all of a sudden that is something that supports the mission of your school in a way that I think is very important. So I think that's been successful for us because that has been consistent and that need has always been there. Those needs for students' health and wellness and their physical development, those are always going to be there, regardless of the leader, regardless of the team, regardless of the metrics. And so by focusing on that, I think that's the right first principle, I guess would be the way I want to say it. That's your right first principle at this level is to help those kids as a person first, who then is an athlete for a team. And if you do that, that gives you a lot of success in the eyes of your administration, in the eyes of your school, because you're championing making having great kids. And I have 4 of my own. I hope and they do that they have teachers and coaches every day that they get to work with, that they make school enjoyable, that they feel inspired, challenged to be their best, to grow not only physically but developmentally. And if you have teachers that really make that their mission, I love the Joel book, the Inside Out Coaching, where they talks about the difference being transformational versus transactional. And we're all going to work with people that are very transactional. It's like, well, this is a job for me. This is what I do to get paid, or here's my teaching prep and all these things that are logistics to our job. But when you really lean in this mission of like, I want to make a difference every day. I want to be a person who cares about my students. Those things I think have been a difference maker for us. So I would say just continue to lean into those. Those are the talks I enjoy giving the most, are about areas in those concepts, because if you really think about somebody to be their best version out on the court or field. So let's just talk about the success, athletically, meaning wins, losses, record. But you want them to be their best. And sometimes, as they always say as coaches, it's not always the best team that wins, who plays the best, right? So you can't always control the outcome, but you just want them to be their best. You look at that, and you look, there's a base level in education. It was the old Maslow model, the base level, basic hierarchy. Physical needs. Yep. Hierarchy of needs. You got it. So, what was the sleep like? What was the diet like? That's a base level. And then there's like a safety level. Does that person feel safe? Do they feel secure there? Because you really can't be your best if you feel threatened or you've got situations in your home life. And so to the level I can solve that in a 1 hour block when I see them every day, the other 23 hours of the day influence that, but I can sure make a difference the hour I see them. But then that middle band, that sense of belonging, am I part of something? Do people love me? All those social needs and those belonging needs are central to the middle part of that pyramid before you get to the top. And so I find that right now, the kids have not changed over the years, but the environment and the other things have definitely changed. But there's a real deficit for a sense of belonging in those things. So that's an area that I have really leaned into, and our program has leaned into the last few years. And I think it's been something that's been very successful for us. And by doing that, that has produced success, but it's also essential for producing success for the right reasons. So I hope, when you ask me, like, what do you think's been most successful? I think it's been that, just focusing on the things that are the most important related to that student's well-being.
Any of our coaches that are listening, and they're maybe in a new spot and they're trying to establish that that culture, that ability to get the kids and the admin and coaches, whatever level they're at, they're trying to show them that they're there to be a transformational coach. But at
Right.
first, nobody really knows that. They think at first, it does kind of start out at transactional. You
Yeah.
just building that, like, hey, I'm trying to show you, like, I got to give you these small wins so you can start to trust me and realize that I'm actually here for you.
Right.
How do you help that coach and recommend to that coach to still keep the main thing being transformational, in doing it in a way that builds their leadership capital, and maybe they do it in transactional ways just to give kids small wins, so that way these kids and admin can start to see, like, hey,
Yeah.
Johnny or Jane or whoever the coach is on my side.
Yeah. So there is an element of the fact I talked about that return on investment. There is an element of the fact that you do have KPIs, you do have metrics. And so I think you lean into the fact that you're tracking what gets measured gets done. But
Yep.
you do want to show, like, hey, we track, their progress over 4 years with all their lifts, with their speed. And those are things I'm regularly sharing with the coaches. Here was, we measure with our advanced kids, we measure their bar speed with some VBT. And so every Friday when I send out the workout next, like, here was our top 20 kids with power outputs for the week. Now, some coaches might say, Coach, I don't even really know what I'm looking at, but I love that you're measuring this, but it leads us to have a discussion. So don't get me wrong. I'm a big believer in data and having that drive and looking for blind spots in myself and in our program. And I don't want to minimize that. So I think that is important, because we look at those at an individual student level. We also look at it as a macro level. What are we meeting? Where are we at this year compared to last year with our total number of kids at certain benchmarks? Are we on track to have this be our best year numbers wise? Are we on track with these things? But there's other metrics that sometimes are harder to quantify, that have to do with motivation of a student, the level of buy-in, interest, their level of enjoyment. So we try to measure those things, but I just think having the discussion makes a big difference. And so I'll give you a couple examples. At the end of each season, we'll do a wellness questionnaire, and I'll put it on the iPads, each rack when their workout. And it's like, hey, just take stock on your season. How was your sleep this season? How was these things? Did you enjoy class every day? Did you, these certain questions. But then we also look at that, like, hey, we saw that this year the kids scored that their enjoyment class was down a little bit than last year. Okay, well, what is that? Well, it just means it's something we look at those things. So, but those also give us evidence to then be able to go forward to those stakeholder groups, our principals, our leadership, and say, here's what we're seeing. And then, they have metrics too. Here's our test scores in English. Here's our, and we're part of a bigger discussion about how kids are doing with their training as opposed to the classroom. And you see those things coming out. Oh, you're having issues with motivation in the weight room a little bit. Yeah, we're seeing it in the classroom. Or here's some things I'm working on, motivation or structure or discipline in the classroom that can help me in the weight room. And so you do see these themes play out throughout the school, depending on the courses they're taking and what they're doing. But you do need to measure that data. A couple years ago, and it's still a main factor, but there was something we did, and it got some attention in our state. And it was one of those things where I felt like I did it selfishly for our physical education program, but then realized it was something that was the right thing to do for other reasons. Was we were going to make a presentation to our school board. And, you always decide, like, what are the big things I want to highlight, and I think student success is always important. When you open up, we sometimes take ourselves way too serious about, okay, well, they want to hear from me or this or that. But when you open up your stuff from your kid's school, what do you gravitate to right away? The pictures of kids being highlighted. You're maybe looking to see, is my son or daughter in there? You want to highlight the success of the students. Like, they're the stars. Like, you don't want to read a couple paragraphs from a person sharing their philosophy and things. So that's, again, I try to, as much as we can, have it be about our students and their success. And by doing that, the way up is down, right? Servant leadership kind of thing. But I'm saying this to say that we always decide what we're going to present to the school. Well, there was a few years back where I thought, our school was really looking hard at their academic data. And that was important for me as well, because I could easily say, well, that doesn't apply to me. The test scores, this or that. But we have fitness testing, and we lean into that. Some schools, not as much, but we're really lean into that. No matter if they're in strength or not, we're going to assess them, and we want to show that growth in fitness. So, I had our data on which of our kids were exceeding the national norms with fitness. I had the ones that were meeting, and I had the ones that were not. So that they think of 3 buckets: exceeding, meeting, and then below. So I had those lists, and I went to some of our academic people and I said, just give me your biggest KPIs that are academic based that you want to look at. They were like attendance, GPA, some of these big metrics they look at, the number of AP classes. What I said, if I give you these now, just we're not going to worry about the names, but just these students, could you give me those metrics for those strength metrics? And it was like, sure enough, our most healthy fit kids were our best academic, had the lowest number of cuts, behavioral issues. Our middle, next band, right? Now, correlation versus causation kind of thing. We understand, it could be the impact of home life and all these things, but it makes it really a powerful message when you're as a school board and you're sitting here thinking, we're seeing health being such an important part. We can't reduce our efforts in supporting and funding physical education and health when we're seeing our most healthy kids are being the most successful. This is one more dial to help them be the best version of themselves, right? Well, then more recently, does that one make sense? So that's a way that makes sense. So another one, now more recently, what have we been here? Well, mental health is on the decline with the kids. It's an epidemic with mental health challenges. Guess what? One of the biggest things is being physically active, being away from the screens, interacting with the peer. The strength coach is one of the biggest leaders in the building on this idea of social, emotional, and the mental side. Because if I can get that student to understand the benefit of a daily workout, and that they're not allowed to be on their phones up here, they're having to interact, spot, pay attention, go. We want them to feel great, worn out, but feel great when they leave every day. And the fact that this is their favorite part of their day is to get to have this workout. So that element and how it impacts the mental health of the student is significant. So most of my things that I've been talking with the last few years is about how our world supports the health of the student in areas they're struggling globally with the student. So I think it goes back to my initial thing where you asked me, and I said, you have to be a good listener, and you have to be aware of what are your student population needs. And if all of a sudden you're seeing some big trends or some deficits, instead of trying to do something you're not, how is what you are doing can make a difference, and being intentional about that, while staying focused on your first principles. So,
bravo to you for that, because that's a great way, like you said, to not only support the student athlete, but to show the best way to actually help them continue to succeed, not only in the short term, but in the long term in their life.
That's right. So those are things that I'm not afraid to take a lot of pride in. I think one of the things on a regular basis, when we do our highlights at the end of each semester, we'll do highlights with all the kids, like one of the last days before they finish up. And we celebrate, hey, here were our strongest kids in the weight room. Here were our kids that were highest on fitness. And you want to celebrate that. You want to shine a spotlight on that, because, if you shine a spotlight on that, you're more likely to have more people aspire to do that, right? Yeah. If you're only shining a spotlight on here are the ways you get in trouble, or here's all of our things, that discourages those that are doing a good job. And it also kind of draws more people well, this is an attention way I can be on somebody's radar. So I think that's something that's important, but also everybody has different things that motivate them, whether external or internal motivation. And that is an area that I think, going back to, you asked me about the difference between a college and a high school, is many times these colleges, you have somebody it's tied to a position on a team and a roster and a scholarship. And so there's a high amount of extrinsic motivation there that is there. Whereas, sometimes the physical education teacher, that that could be different. So you have to be even more so intentional about helping that kid dial in on why are they in there? What's their why? Why are they want to be in this class? What's their goals? It may not even have anything to do with athletics. It could be preparing for a military goal. It could be just wanting to be in better shape. It could be, just a variety of things. But we had you talk about one of those KPIs, and I wanted to share this with you. I found a few years ago when we were talking about this idea of motivation, we were having a hard time identifying, like, are we all measuring it the same way? And I think based on the comfort and the confidence or the experience of a coach, it's easy to come in and somehow say, well, these kids are not working hard, or this coach says, well, you know what, they actually are. But it also has a little bit of a lens of like kind of the glass half full, glass half empty kind of view of it. If you're an optimistic coach or one that's, always lives in the gap or the margin of like, you can have everything going great, but they're just always focused on that. So I know the lens of that coach shapes it, but also the lens of the experience of somebody's trying to leverage themselves by saying, well, I'm pointing out the flaws to somehow elevate my own, showing that I can point out all the flaws. But I'm saying all that because we were looking at how are we going to actually, if we can come to an agreement on how we want to measure motivation, like a common language with that, then that we've set the way we're going to measure it in a sense that like that can lead our discussion. So it was kind of this vague idea of like, at the end of the semester, if we were to make motivation measurable, what would that look like? And that would be a great question for a lot of the schools out there. Like if motivation is important to you, how can you quantify it? Okay, well, I'm not just going to give you the answer because it's different for each school, but you have to, as a team. So we have a broad team, about 10 different people that teach a strength class or help after school. And so that variety and their differences shape what that looks like. And so as we had that discussion, we're pulling resources like everybody else. We're like, we like this model, we like this motivational model, but we said we're going to do like a 10-point scale, and then we realized after the first year, really we need to shrink that down to like a 1 to 4, and we used some other models that we liked with that. So what we came up with, and we've used it the last few years, is a 1 to 4 scale, and it's kind of a combination of some stuff a lot of other people use, but it really has become important for us. And so a 4 would be a student that every day is kind of our excellent students. There are ones that win the awards, but they're our best of the best. And there are kids that we want to spotlight them. We want to praise them. We want to challenge them, but I don't pick favorites. I want every kid to know they're all valuable to Coach Beerbower, but there is an element of the fact that like sometimes our excellent students are given a little bit more freedom for self-improvement because they've earned that right to do that. So they stay motivated, over the course of your training every day, we're not dropping the standards for them, but we're giving them the freedom to do that because they need that new challenge stimulus. Then we have our 3s, which are good, they're above average, but they're not excellent. Okay, so they're consistent to what we're trying to do, but they need to be pushed to become a 4, right? We don't want them to slide back to a 2. They're kind of moderately interested in self-improvement, but they're not intrinsically motivated. Our 4s, if I'm gone that day, they're going to work just as hard. They don't rely on anybody out. They're self-motivated and self-disciplined.
Yeah.
Those 3s they need that little bit extra to each day. And that's why they're good, but it's why they're not excellent. 2s obviously are below average. So these kids are partially interested in self-improvement, but they're resistant to standards. They'll be the ones that I have to stay on. You mentioned about like, hey, you're not allowed to wear those shoes. You need to change. You're not allowed to, you're going to test me on this on a regular basis, but the standard's not going to change. And you're always wondering, like, why do they test me on that every day? Well, they're somebody that motivation is below average, or they just, maybe that their shape of how they've grown up is they just feel like they can wear people down and get by with it over time. But, our goal with 2s is to get them to become 3s, to kind of move over the curve into the, being above average, right? And then our ones would be our poor students. They're not interested in self-improvement. They're kind of bought out. These would be the kids that a college program would probably cut.
Yeah.
Right. But we can't cut students here where they're in our classes. Right. So you always have a percentage of kids that are in there because they just want to be there because their counselor put them in the class, or they have a friend up there, but they really have no interest in training or getting better every day. Now, you still love them. I love fours because they're kids. And I'm going to treat them with that same level of respect, but their motivation is so low, you don't treat a one like you do a four, and you have to just be aware. So I'm saying all that to say, the old 10-80-10 rule. You do have to sometimes be aware that probably on the perimeters, you've got about 10% or so of your kids that are fours, and you have about 10% that are ones. And so any given day, you're moving the middle of the curve.
Yep.
You're trying to move that 80% to become more like threes and fours, but you also don't want to slip back. And I just think that you asked me about the metrics that have helped us. So each year, each teacher will just go through and, like, on the roster, like at the end of the semester, where did you see that student with motivation? And we don't necessarily have conversations with them one-on-one, but we just look at that from macro level. And we found, wow, our kids that showed interest in the military scored higher than our ones that did. Our kids that had high amounts of absenteeism, no surprise, were farther with the scale. We found that certain grade level, so we're really dialed in on that data on motivation. And I think it's been good for us because it's prompted us to have some good discussions as a team on, what things are we seeing influence that. And so similar to the VBT data or the strength data or this, you start, if motivation is important to you, if mental health, all these things are important to you, don't be afraid to lean into, like, how can I quantify it? What does that mean? What things am I noticing? So, but I think all those metrics and numbers give me things that I can then go forward, going back to your question about what give you that momentum early on. Those measurable things give you information that then you can build off of and really show demonstrated success. Like, here is the evidence that what we're doing is making a difference. It's not just me telling you because I'm so charismatic. Like, here's what it is. Like, here's been our motivation the last few years. Here's been the things we're seeing with trends. So I wanted to share that as a scale. I think that's been something we've done, but anybody could do anything related to their own program and find that. But I felt like I wanted to share that.
Anybody listening might be like, okay, if he's doing all of this, how in the world does he still have time to be an adjunct professor as well? Hawken Dynamics is my preferred choice for force plates and for handheld dynamometers. Made in the USA, up in Maine, I have been using them since 2020 when I was at Towson University. Still use them at Goldfinch today, and I brought the plates to the high school that I've trained at. We will use the plates and transport them when we train athletes at the many different high schools that we currently work at. As I said, they are a handheld dynamometer as well with the True Strength. You can assess athlete internal, external rotation, hip, AB, adduction, calf strength, hip, whatever you want to assess, you can do with the True Strength. It also has the ability to pair with the difference striking machine, so now you can see single strike, multiple strike. Check out Hawken Dynamics down in the link down below.
Well, I don't know that I do a great job with that sometimes, but I will tell you what I am going to do is I'm always going to make sure and have time to be. I try to build systems. When you had told me, said our friend came and said, Coach really had a system going there. I am intentional about that. And that is something else I would tell the high school coach is try to build a system that the system runs itself. You don't need to be the ringleader out there, get rid of the ego where, like, somehow you got to be on the whistle. It's all about you. And, like, I'm running this program and, I'm this authoritarian. Like, if you build a system, you want the class and the program to run itself. And you want it to be something that it's such a strong system that at any given point, you can give a new student an opportunity to be, hey, I want you to lead this team as they go around this circuit. Because then they may be a different level of leadership, but they're going to grow throughout it. And so we have our whole workout during the day is on a timer. When they come in, the warm up, it's down to the minute on what we're doing. And that structure lends it to believe, like the kids know those daily habits, atomic habits, James Clear, but those habits run to where, they don't have to think about that. They just know, here's what we're doing. Here's how it's going to happen. But I'm saying all that to say, selfishly, if I have 70 or 80 kids that hour on my roster, or we have that, I want to daily check in with each kid. So I will be intentional about doing my part to get it going and being attentive to safety or coaching, all these things. But every day I'm trying to check in with every student in some capacity. A fist bump, how you doing today? That looked great. I want them to see me, have some interaction every day, but it also gives me the ability to assess where I'm seeing they're at. And so you talk about, like, how do you have time to do that? You do that because you've been intentional about it, creating a system that allows you to do that. I think that's very important, to create a system that gives you enough bandwidth and gives you enough margin to where you can be intentional with the student individually. I don't want to be tied to a computer back here in the office. I don't want to be tied to a metric or a dashboard of a KPI. And I know I've shared about that motivation and very specific about numbers and how we're scoring them. But at the end of the day, that kid's more than a scorer to me. And that's a person. And if they are scoring a 2, there's a reason. There's a reason. If they're fighting me on dressing for class, it's probably not about the clothes. It's probably about some kind of factor that's creating that. And so if you can get to that core reason, the beliefs about themselves, their thoughts, all those things, but that takes interactions with the coach. And that's really what I'm about. I'm a relational person. I love people. I love working with students, and I want them to know that. At the end of the day, you guys heard me talk before. I'm always going to say, everybody wants to know they belong, that they're loved, and that they're special. And so any kid that comes out of this facility, I want them to know I felt like I was part of something there. I belonged there. I was a McHenry Warrior. Coach made me feel like I was an important part of this program, that he loved me. Now, you might not feel comfortable saying that, and I may sometimes say that, but I want them to feel that with the way you emote and the way you treat them. But then I also want them to know they're special to me. And through things like the TVs, or the way I talk to them, or the way I highlight them, or ask them about their siblings, or how their game went, or things I've noticed where I speak encouragement into them, that daily interaction lets them know that they're special to me. Now, if you can do those 3 things, think about yourself, people that you interact with, that that you belong, that you are loved and you're special to them, you're going to be more likely to give your best in that environment, not just for that person, but you're going to feel better about yourself, where you're going to want to produce your best. And when those things are not being met, kids can go to some dark places to meet those needs. They can do some bad things to belong to something. They can do some bad things because they feel unloved, or they can do a lot of bad things to feel special in somebody's eyes. So I think those kind of things and those kind of messages are what I'm about. And but I think that's what our program is about, because it's a reflection of what we care about.
Amen. Last question here, to respect your time and going about the rest of your day. What's something that people don't know about you that you wish people would know about you?
Wow. You're good at this, Coach. This is good. I think something somebody doesn't know about me. I think there are times where people can be around me. And I feel very uncomfortable saying this, but they're like, well, Coach is an inspirational person, or he's motivational, because I think the role lends an opportunity for that to be expressed. Like, I do genuinely enjoy encouraging people. I think every coach kind of you have to take time to really figure out, like, what are your strengths, and then play to those. I've had really stoic coaches that were very impactful. I've had some that were very disciplined, hard travel, but I've also had others that was impactful other ways. For me, I naturally enjoy encouraging people. So as I do that, it's life-giving to me, and it helps me be more effective as a coach. So that's something for me. I'm saying all that to answer your question, to say, you could easily say, well, Coach is like that all the time. But I think people would be surprised to know, probably like a lot of, there are times where I need to take some time for myself and just get real quiet and just work through, like, you're going on a regular basis, processing things on a regular basis. I've found as I've gotten older, like I'm as prone to get down and discouraged as anybody, and I think being intentional about self-care, taking time to reflect on how am I doing. We lost my dad a little bit less than a couple years ago, and I feel like I'm at a healthy spot of grieving about that, but it's been doing a lot of reflection on, like, wow, both my parents are gone now. Like, that when you start contemplating your own mortality, like, how do I, am I preparing my kids to be in the spot that I'm in now when I'm gone or we're both gone? And so, your lenses change a little bit as you get older. And I think some of that time I found I needed to just do by myself. And so more recently, it's like I've been better. You mentioned about you're busy. I've been better about taking time to, like, hey, I'm just going to go on a drive and be by myself, because that's an important time for me to just shut everything down where I'm giving out, because I'm needing to be mindful, pray about some things, or just process how I'm doing. And I didn't do that real well when I was younger. You're people pleasing. You're trying to validate your worth and things and areas that through those things. So I think people would probably, I don't talk about that much, but I think people would not know that about me just because you see something, or this is like, oh, he's always positive, encouraging people. He's always in a great mood. Yeah, but I struggle with those things just like our students do. And you have to work through those, and they do make you stronger. They do make you stronger. That adversity makes you stronger, but it's as you adapt to it and you figure out, you work through things. But if I do that well, then I've got something to give others. If I neglect those needs, the next thing you know, the cup's empty on my side too. So great question. I didn't think I'd mention that, but that it would be it.
Appreciate it, Coach. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't discuss? This is your opportunity. You're talking to tons of coaches right now.
Well, I would say this. You having me on being a high school coach. Not because of the time off, not because of the school at night, all those things. You have a tremendous opportunity to make a difference at a high school level. I have degrees that will allow me to do a lot of different things, but I feel like right now, while God's got me in this spot, I have an opportunity where this role allows me to really encourage a lot of kids every day. And I'm grateful for it. I think it's the best job in a school. I do. Job meaning, a title, but it's the best opportunity in the school. And I've coached different individual sports, but I think being a strength coach especially is a unique opportunity because, the kids see that you're truly there to make them better. And I think that eliminates some barriers that give them feeling more comfortable to interact. Like, well, my interaction with coach has nothing to do with playing time or making the squad. It's truly about just trying to get the best out of you. And so I think that strength role at the high school level is important, but especially can really make a difference. And then the last thing I will say is there's the verse in Matthew 5, and it talks about, it says, you are the light of the world. And you don't hide that. You don't put it under a bowl. You put it up there, and you let your light shine so that other people can see your good deeds and glorify God in heaven. That's Coach Beerbower. I don't preach at kids, but I want them to see that God has given me the ability to demonstrate love because he loved me. And I'm going to let that light shine, whether it be in a public school, private school. There may be a day where I'm not wearing this logo, but while he lets me wear this and while he lets me serve in this building, I'm going to use this to let my light shine. So that's how I want to conclude today.
Amen. Nowhere better to end it. Thanks for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, click right here for videos just like that, and make sure you click here to subscribe to our channel. Have a great rest of your day.